Welcome everybody to the FileMaker user group Dallas chapter. I'm Taylor Sharp and today is Friday, November 5th. We're glad to have everybody here and hopefully this is an audience of FileMaker developers ready to do some advanced learning here. We have today with us Heather McCue. She's familiar to most of us in the group here. She's I always think of her first and foremost as the HIPAA expert in the FileMaker community, among other things, but that's one thing that she has quite the reputation for. But she's been a longtime developer and friend, and learned a lot from her from over the years. And we are looking forward to hearing a little more today about documentation. So,
all right, does everyone see the progress documentation via script logging on their screen?
Yes.
Awesome. The presentation gods are here after all. Thank goodness. Okay, so this just speaks for itself. FMPUG Dallas, November 5th. I now have a new title. I am, well, the order of it, I'm not sure. I'm either expert of design and documentation or design and documentation expert. Following the Harmonic realigned meeting last Friday. More on that to come for anyone who's interested. All right, moving on. So for the system I'll be discussing today, our client, get those out of the way. The client staging server is for development and user acceptance testing, or UAT. Their production server is in use 5 to 6 days a week by local and remote clients, and portions of it are available 24/7 via custom web publishing to thousands of their participants and staff. Schema within the production files is never modified during business hours while in use by the client, and staging files are where modifications are made and user acceptance testing is performed. And features that have passed UAT are transferred to production within the next scheduled build, and builds are regularly scheduled for every 2 weeks. So it's important to understand that we have to transfer data from the staging system to the production system. So we migrate the data using a tool that we built, and of course the FileMaker technology for doing data migration, but we also have to actually transfer the files over and new features. And of course, when we add new features like a new table or we add new fields, sometimes those new schema objects require scripts that have to be performed during the cutover of that build. So when we do a build at 5 p.m. on Thursdays every other week, like we did last night, we have to do cutover scripts to backfill data, populate new tables that we've created, et cetera. And so that's the scenario that I'm talking about that brought me to this presentation. So the challenge was a long-term project that was generating a longer list of cutover tasks than usual because it took the better part of a year. Well, maybe a little longer than a year, longer than I'd like to admit, maybe closer to like 18 months-ish. The last build that we did for them in this one part of their system was July of 2020. We did hot fixes and things like that over the course of the year in between, but the big build with the new system went live on September 17th. So that was 14 months before the next build. So as you can imagine, there was a lot in there. So there were new tables, some new major tables that had to be populated with data, big tables like checks and vendor credits and things like that. So we needed to do a lot. And a lot of things had to happen. And there wasn't going to be any time to spare, unlike previous builds where it was okay if a completed script went unnoticed for a bit because, we started at 5. The migration itself took, I don't know, Eric, how long? couple hours, a few hours, depending, but you know, as long as we had it up by 6 a.m. East Coast time, we were good, and that was usually no problem. This was going to take much, much longer. In fact, we knew that it was going to happen over a weekend. And so there wasn't going to be any time to spare. Everything had to stay in motion from beginning to end. So before I dive into how I resolved the challenge, it'll be helpful to first look at a couple of earlier cutover scripts. So if scripts are required during a cutover, we store them in build-specific folders in the file. And even though we don't go back and reuse them usually, or hopefully I should say, we keep them on hand because we sometimes need to know how was something done, how was something backfilled, you know, because I don't know if it's never happened to you, but sometimes turns out it was not the way it should have been. Or sometimes it turns out it was always that way because it was always supposed to be that way. So these hanging on to those scripts is always good. But we've had so many builds. Actually, last night was build 154, and we started saving these scripts in 106. So it's been a long time we've been hanging on to these. So anyway, we're going to take a look at an early one of these from build 110. Let's see here. We're going to look at update mileage totals. Now, as you can see, this was a very simple script. Basically went to a layout, did a find, and replaced the data in a field to trigger an auto calc that had been modified. And then it was disabled to prevent it from ever being used again. And that was, what's that, 3 years ago, if my math is right? 3 years and a couple months. So that was quite a while ago. That's how simple it used to be. And it did not take long to run something like that. Next, from the same build, we have another script, a little bit longer. We'll look at link 2.0, link 2.0 to 1.0 lines, also from a high level. So it's a little longer script, a few more lines. For the purpose of our discussion today, this script has 4 segments, and they aren't A through D like the comments show. First segment is the exporting of the primary key and the modification fields. We do this so that they can be restored after our modifications are complete, because we don't want to lose the current modification data, user modifications and such, just because we did some backfilling due to a build. Next, the script performs its core activities. In this case, it preps a found set, saves a snapshot link, sets a new foreign key or multiple foreign keys, and runs a related subscript. It then restores the original modification values, and then it reports its results. So this is a pretty common pattern that we use for cutover scripts. We export the mods, we do stuff, we restore the mods, and then we report the results. And we usually would do this using a custom dialog, because the purpose of reporting the results was so that we knew that it had done what it was supposed to do, and we knew how long it took. And we would typically, I say typically as though we didn't ever test this stuff. We always tested this stuff, but we often tested with smaller data sets. Depending on how essential it was, what we were doing, or how much we needed to test to prove that it worked. So we didn't always know exactly how long it was going to take, but we always had done enough testing to have a good idea, more than a fair assessment of how long it was going to take. With this build, though, that we did in September, we had to do a full test, 100% of everything, because it was going to take so long, we couldn't take any chances. We had to know, was this even possible to do over the course of a weekend? So there's a few other details within the same script that I'd like to point out. The capturing of start and end timestamps. We do this basically at the shell level. of the entire script, and we do it within subscripts and subsections of a script. Again, because if there are issues, we want to know where they are, and we want to know how long different activities took. We also do error trapping where appropriate, because we don't want these cutover scripts to get hung up for no reason or to fail. And we go live into production the next morning. They show up at 6 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock our time, and our phones start buzzing and our Slack starts ringing, and everybody's unhappy because something didn't happen right. We didn't catch it. So we do error trapping to make sure of everything. We, after a go to related record, after a find, after everything, we always do the error trapping. We also use get script result after using a subscript. Again, we're doing some error trapping. We're capturing the results of a subscript so that the parent script knows whether the subscript might have failed. It's very important for our backfills. These aren't scripts that, well, these are scripts that don't run repeatedly. So it's not like if there's an error, it's not a big deal because it's going to get run tomorrow after you've fixed it, and it'll fix it. The data will get fixed and everything will be fine. These are scripts that are intended to be run once, and then they'll probably never be run again. So it's real important that all the error trapping is in there. And the get script results. Now, we also use periodic screen refreshes. Now, not everyone at Harmonic uses those, though I have noticed a few have picked this up. I use this, I started using this years ago because I don't know if any of you have gotten into this situation where you've got a script that's looping through, I don't know, maybe 1 million records, maybe just 10,000, but it's incredibly slow. And because your screen is frozen and you don't happen to be in debug mode, you have no idea what your progress is. You have no idea how far along you are because it's not doing commits. It's just giving you no sense of where it's at. So I started using this a long time ago with a simple mod and get record number. And oftentimes I'll hard code, just like we see in this example here, a fixed number so that every X number of records, the screen will refresh. So at least I can see that counter in that upper left corner of my screen updating. You know, now sometimes I set it too high and it takes too long. Sometimes I set it too low and it goes so fast that it's like, now I know I'm wasting time, that I'm making it slower by having it do that, right? So depending on what it's doing and the type of records you're working on, you have to adjust how frequently you do that. And not all scripts even need that. And it's not about how many records there are. It's all about how performant the script is, whether or not you need that. Yes, Taylor.
Maybe you could set it based on time interval instead of.
You could, yes. Yeah, anything, because basically it's within your loop. So anything, you'd have to, with time, you'd have to be testing millisecond, I'm sure, because the loops go so fast that, yeah, because otherwise it would be like, could be doing it like multiple records repeatedly because they're in the same second, you know. But anyway, yeah, so I do that a lot. And when we get into the challenge that I faced here and the solution I came up with and what we are here to talk about, that will be one of the factors that's important. Okay, that's just why I'm sharing this with you. Okay, so the concept that I envisioned was a simple data-driven script running tool, not a script scheduling tool like the server or a bot-like tool intended for recurring local runs, but something built specifically for short or even single run collections of multiple sequentially run scripts, like you would do in a cutover and a new build, where you're backfilling data and doing a lot of transactions. It would use perform script by name, obviously. It would track the run times of each individual script as well as the overall duration of the collection. And one of the reasons that it would do that, not just because we're curious, but it would capture that and store it because we're used to doing this with individual scripts, but that means we have to be there to see the dialogue. But what if, well, we were out in the swimming pool with our granddaughter and we missed the dialogue and we get back and it turns out that dialogue's been up for 35 minutes, sitting there waiting for us to click it. That's 35 minutes that it wasn't moving on to the next thing. So we want to get rid of those. We want to store that information instead. Also, I got tired of writing down all those numbers and then forgetting which numbers went with which thing that was happening. Also, I tend to collect a lot of information within scripts because my scripts will do a lot of things. So I'll track multiple lines of information and how long different things took. So being able to store that now instead of having to write it all down from a dialogue that shows up is something I thought would be a good thing to do. So I want to document the results. And let's see, it would record the results from both the scripts being called and their subscripts. And it would put an end to the endless hours of what I call babysitting long running scripts, or even worse, the dreaded downside of not babysitting your scripts, which is all the time that gets wasted, or having scripts that just run without feedback and something fails and you didn't know it. All right, so I started by adding a simple table. I called it cutover progress because the challenge I had was going live with this 1.5-year old project. And so I was doing a cutover and I wanted to track the progress. Now, before I show you the fields, I did want to point out some of the record counts in this file. I won't call them all out. You just scroll down there with your own eyes and see there are a lot of records in here. And I can tell you that this cutover touched a lot of them. So it was going to take a while. Now, the table itself, interestingly, had 19 records right now and 19 fields, just a coincidence. Of the 19 fields in this table, there are 5 default fields at the top, creation, modification, etc. 7 script-specific repeating fields for the scripts that we're going to program in or define. And it proved really useful. I originally started with 9 repetitions because I only had 7 big scripts that I needed to put in because I had a lot of subscripts. But it turned out to be so useful that then, like Daisy said, hey, I've got a couple scripts that need to go on your thing. And then there was something else that got added. And then I had 2 more that got added. And now we have 20 repetitions. And I kept having to change my UI to make more repetitions fit. But it worked extremely well. Or we would have gone another route. I also didn't want to do like a relational model here because I wanted a quick solution and I didn't want to make it that complicated. I also wanted something that I could like grab this object and I could drop it somewhere else. It and the one script that it runs and drop it somewhere else. Okay, so I know about all the potential woes associated with repetitions with repeating fields. So don't slam me about that because I'm not really storing data here per se. This is a tool. So I think this fits the allowed usage. There are also some cutover level fields in there, such as the begin, end, duration, and comment, which are optional. Some of those are optional things. Okay, moving on. So next, I created a very simple layout where I could specify the script names and their refresh intervals if applicable. And then I would just need to select the start and the routine would immediately record the begin time of the first script. And when the first script was finished, it would record the results, the end time, and then it would calculate the duration, and then it would move on to the next script and the next script and so on until it was done. And it would record a final time. And of course, it would calculate the total duration for the whole cutover. So let's take a look at the script. Wow, you cannot see that, can you? Well, that's okay, because you don't really need to, because I've highlighted important parts. You only need to see the blocks. You don't see the detail. You can imagine what's under the blocks. And this is recorded, right? So somebody who really wants to can read that underneath there. There's nothing proprietary under there. All right, so we start with some opening verifications. You know, are you in the right place? Are you allowed to be here? And a couple of other things. All right, then we load up the script names. And you may be on a record that already has the scripts loaded, or you might want to create a new one that's going to use the template record. So that's dealing with that. And then we prep your window, because here's another factor. Remember, I mentioned earlier that I want to see progress and I want to know what's happening. So I built the UI so that I can see the progress while it's happening. So those rows have conditional formatting on them. So I can just see from across the room where it's at, because the rows that are done are a different color. The row that it's on is bright green, fluorescent. So I know where it's at. And it also has a big percentage down at the bottom to let me know where it's at as well. So I want the window with my progress up there. But remember, I talked about the refreshing every so often. So I want a second window where all the work's actually being done. And I want them to be positioned in my window space on my screen so I can see them both, right? So I'm prepping the cutover window here. Yes, Taylor.
Are you doing scripts at the same time?
No, because they're running from one script, so they can't run simultaneously because it's looping through them, which you'll see in a moment. Okay, then we have some options. Before it actually starts running the scripts, it's got your window ready, your starting window. But before it opens a second window to actually start running the scripts, it's going to give you the option to change your refresh rates. Because once it gets ready, once it gets going, you might realize, oh, wait. I wasn't thinking that through. So I gave myself an out to be able to change the refresh rates. But usually you've already done that and you're just gonna say, yep, go ahead. Because when I said, yep, go ahead, and this went live, it took like 30 hours. So you do wanna be sure that you've got it set up right. And then once you've said, okay, you're good, it opens the script running window, and then you walk away for 2 days, or however long it's going to take. And it just does what it's supposed to do. It loops through the records. It loops through those repetitions where you've defined the scripts. It performs them using perform script by name. And when it's done, it does some housekeeping. It closes the extra window, and it clears some global fields, and it's done. Now, the key and where the logging comes in. One part of the logging is this cool little table, and where I'm storing the results. But if you look underneath there, you can see, and I'm not sure exactly how to put like a, I don't know if I can anyone see my cursor?
Mm-hmm. We can.
Oh, well, I know you in the room can. I don't know if people on the...
Yes, I can see your cursor over.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so you see here where we have cutover progress, that is my table where I defined the scripts I'm gonna run. I'm setting the results for the repetition of the script that is currently running within the loop. And I'm setting this, well, you don't see all of the detail there because, it's off screen, but there's different options for what it's going to show. The first one here, the first option is if the refresh value for that repetition is less than 0, as in just -1, that means that that script is being skipped. And so it's going to report that script skipped, right? So you can have a script listed and then decide before you run it, well, I'm going to do a test run, but not that script. So you can very easily, you don't have to take it out. You can just change the value in the refresh column. The only columns you have to fill in are the script name and the refresh value, and the refresh value is optional. So really you just have to put the script name in. This, by the way I have it now is not set for any of these scripts to run with parameters. None of these scripts, because they're all built in this, in my scenario here, they're all cutover scripts. So they don't have parameters of their own. They have their one-time use kind of things. So though some of their subscripts do, but the same thing could be built with a parameters field that you could put parameters into just as easily. And we've done that for other dynamic scripting systems. But anyway, so we're recording the results in there. But what we've done is, if you look a little higher there, let me get my cursor up going again. There we go. Up in here, we have performed the script here. And under there, under my R, set variable result, we've set, is it that one?
What's your custom function dot error?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one.
No.
It's within here. It is within here that we're doing it. That's capturing if there was an error coming back. And it is within our result here. It's within that long case statement that you can't see. We're capturing this get script result from the script run that we did. And so the script that ran is exiting with a result. And its subscripts are exiting with results. And they're basically coming up the chain. So let's move on so we can see that, because that's what we're going to do. We're going to play in the sandbox. Did everyone get the idea, though, of how, I know we haven't looked at any of the actual scripts that are feeding that information up the chain, but did everyone understand about where I'm going to put the information once I've got it? Okay. Did everyone understand the problem that I was trying to solve? Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to close this. And on my other screen here that you cannot see, I'm going to verify that, in fact, I was able to reopen this file because it is remote. It's not fast. It looks like I was able to open it. And let me see if I can get the cursor back. And let me see if I can actually get it over to the screen that is being shared. Here it is. All right, I'm going to turn myself around here now. Does that mess with the camera at all? Too much?
If it's using your camera, you're fine.
Oh, okay. All right. Great.
He's got another camera going on here, but
that's what I was asking about. Okay. All right. Here we go. So that mouse needs to not be there because it doesn't do anything with my computer. I keep trying to move it and it's doing nothing. All right. Let's try again. All right. Let me. Yeah, we'll just make it big. Make it a little bigger. Okay, so this is the actual file. This is our staging copy that we're looking at. And we know that because it's bright blue up here instead of dark black and gray. That's how we tell them apart. Okay, so these are our script names that have been defined in here. You'll notice that when I click into them, they're popping me out. We've got script triggers on here that after this record has been completed, these can't be edited. So they're protected after they've been run. You'll notice that this one has -1 in the refresh column. So this one was not actually run. you'll notice the data that we have in here. You know, we exported the mods. Tells us when the export ran, when it started, how long it took, what records were updated, how long that took, and then we restored the mods and how long that took. So some of these don't take very long at all. And then that one, of course, this was run, like this was the very first test run that I did here, 7:30. And by the way, you'll notice I've got some other dates in here. That's because this record is where I collected the full results. We started with 7 and then we went up to many, many more. And what I wanted to do, because we ended up adding scripts that needed to be run, but I couldn't rerun the whole set every time we added a new script because some of these scripts took a very long time to run. So I would run them individually using the same tool like this. So I ran this one and it took 3 hours, 19 minutes. And then what I would do is I would take the settings, I would basically take the data from that row and I'd bring it back over here to this record and pop it in. And actually I've got another layout here. Let's just move to that so that you can see all the rows. There we go. So the backfill checks for payments here, you can see. So this one, you see different dates in here. And you can see quite a variety here, going from 7:30 all the way to what, 9:14. We did the cutover on 9:17. So it was all the way up to 3 days before go live that we were finding other things that we should add to this. But the beautiful thing was that when we went live and did it for real, now doing these separately, it was going to be 34 hours. So we figured if we started by, what was it, 8 o'clock Friday night, that we would be done in time to be able to validate everything after this was finished and have them show up at 6 a.m. on Monday. If I scroll through here, we'll find, that was my first test. And I said, it's going to take 20 hours. And then we found other things we had to do. But this was a great tool for being able to do that. And yeah, some of these just took little tiny bits of time. Some took a little bit more. And then I did a full-on test of everything, start to finish. Started at 8 p.m. on a Friday night to basically recreate ahead of time what was going to happen and were we going to make it. And it finished at 7:30 the following Saturday night, 29 hours. And we had 13 scripts running. I'll tell you, one of the things that I really liked about this that I was not expecting to find was that we have an issue sometimes with the server schedules where we have scripts that can't run until another one has finished. We have a schedule that shouldn't run. I say can't, and by can't, I mean shouldn't be allowed to run, but that script is not aware that another script hasn't finished yet. And some days it just takes a little longer because there was more data. And sometimes there are easy ways to know, and sometimes there are not. Depends on what you're looking at. And with this, it just can't go until the last one was done because it just doesn't. And I'm not suggesting that this or that there isn't a better way to do that isn't doing this repeating fields thing and such, but it got me thinking that maybe there's some better ways to do other things that we do. But anyway, you'll notice too that the refresh column has different values in them because some of them I needed to see them more frequently and some much less frequently. and some not at all. And let's go just a little farther here. We'll find. So I also found we had some scripts for records for tables that we added brand new that were utility tables. And we do a migration from production into our staging files. Those tables don't have any data because they don't exist in production yet. So the data that we've populated into these utility tables are gone, including this table here. I learned that the hard way, that I had forgotten to think about that one. So you'll see a script there for export cutover progress table, right? Because it's got the template for all my scripts I'm going to run, right? So I had to grab that from a backup. Oops, oops. It's never happened to any of us, has it? Anything like that, right? So I just created another record. And this is really where that section of my script came in that says, well, do you want to run from the record you're on? Or do you want to use a template? Because maybe I just want to run this one, right? So I had added the option where I can actually just run this itself, which I did before our cutover and did all the exports just with one button hit. I didn't have to remember anything else, just ran this once and it was done. And oh, there we go. So you can see one this is the next one. This would be the one that's running. Oh, it's not bright green. I'm sorry, I lied. It's bright yellow, bright yellow. You can still see it across a room or from the swimming pool if you see it through the window, right? Then that was my intent. And this was the actual go live. Well, we didn't make it by 8 p.m. start, but 11:43 Friday night. And we finished up Sunday afternoon at 4:30. And I can see here that there was an error, that there was a script that didn't run. Now, I reran that script and it was one that didn't have dependencies that followed it. So, but this told me that there was a problem and that the script didn't run. If I didn't have this, I probably wouldn't have known. So that was real helpful. Okay, so anyway, before we run out of more time, let me show you in the scripts where the logging comes in. So remember the things that I showed you about those sample scripts from earlier. It's all about how you're, oops, sorry. Oh, I hit the wrong button, sorry. Not the, we do not want to go into the schema on a remote, on the WAN, on this system. No, no. It would be so bad, so bad. But we can go into the scripts. Absolutely can go into the scripts. All right, so let's see if I can blow this up just a little bit. Here we go, okay. So obviously this is real simple for the export, but we've started with, I mean, the exports are real simple, but even for just an export, I'm exiting the script with some information. So my exit scripts always have some data in them that's going to tell, you know, that's going to get captured by the parent script. And that's going to end up getting stored into the record. Let's take a look at something a little more. Actually, let's look at, let's see what one of the scripts is. Here, let's pick one. No, that was not the button I meant. I was trying to make it bigger and that was apparently not the right thing to do. I was trying to do it the wrong way. Cannot see the, there we go. All right, how about, ooh, backfill checks. What do you think, Daisy? Backfill checks? Nope. All right, backfill checks it is. Okay. Oh, if we look real quick here. Now, these are the 16 mostly parent scripts. And if we look back here, just so you can get an idea of how many cutover scripts we typically do with a build, you can see there usually aren't that many, right? But for this bookkeeping 2.0 build, of course, we had the prep stuff here. But then, and I'll start at the bottom because otherwise it'll take forever. That was our list from here to here. That's all that we had to do. And since it took as long as it did, can you imagine trying to do that in order manually? It just wouldn't have happened. And with all the exports and imports that had to be done, they really weren't scripts that could have been scheduled on the server and certainly not knowing where they were at. I don't know if you've ever tried, if any of you have ever tried to check the status of a script that's running on the server by looking at the data. Not an easy thing to do, usually. I certainly didn't want to do it. So anyway, there's a lot there. Okay, so we are looking for backfill checks. Right here we go. Okay, so the very first thing that I did is for every script, I added this section, these 3 lines, set externally defined conditions. I let them know that they were external. There is a global variable called external, and basically external is the name of the script that's calling this. So the script that's calling this as a subscript, that's doing the perform script by name, is setting a global external value to its own script name. So, and then it's sending itself as the parameter when it runs the subscript. So basically it knows that it's external and that it's a match to what it should be. And it also checks for the refresh being greater than 0, if there is a refresh, okay? I also added the start to every subscript that didn't have one. And then at the end, wherever there was a custom dialog, because a lot of these scripts, that especially the subscripts that existed, already had these show custom dialogs in them. We already had scripts for exporting mods and importing mods, for example, because we use those all the time. And so they already had the custom dialogues. So I just wrapped those in the, if not external, then we show the dialogue, otherwise exit script. Similar to how we would say, if you're not the server, do this, otherwise, ignore it if you're the server, right? So basically, we add at the top some conditions to let it know that we are external and that we have a refresh or not. We wrap any custom dialogues, whether they are at the end or anywhere within the script. We wrap custom dialogues so that they're handled properly. Any place that there is an exit, we make sure that the exit includes a result. And we make sure that there is a result being set at some point before the exit. So if you have a place in your script through error testing that there is an exit script, you want to make sure that it has a result that's being sent back. If it didn't, now this one happened to already have a result that was appropriate to be sent back, but sometimes we have, you know, error trapping and it just exits script with no particular reason. So you would want to change that so that it does feedback a reason. Now, because I didn't want to get into, well, no, actually that one didn't. This is one where I did do what I did. So this is one where we didn't have anything particular. We did have error trapping, but it didn't feed anything back. So my default was that I said it's a find error because it was following a find. And then all I did was provide the script name and the line number. And that line number is where that line was at the time that I added that. And obviously this script has been modified some since then, and it's no longer line 17. But that's enough information for me. When I see that in the result, I can go into the script and I can figure out where it failed. It was a find error. So we add the header, we add the result, and we wrap our custom dialogues. We do that same thing on this script and any subscripts, and everything will flow. If we run and the second thing is if we do run a subscript, let's see if I can find one that runs a subscript. We run a subscript, we do the get results afterwards. So same thing here, you can see the custom dialog is wrapped in the not external. And we've set our results. We make sure we have an end timestamp so that we get the duration fed back. Now, I'm tedious about the durations on subscripts. You may not be, and it may be fine just to let the shell script that's running these capture the start and end times of the run, and that's perfectly fine too. But the key to making these all roll everything up is this up here, if I don't move it around, and wrapping your custom dialogues and capturing your subscript results. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I ran out of time and I couldn't diagram that so that it's a good reference, but I would be happy to do that so someone can reference it if that would be helpful. And I can also share, I can't share this file exactly, but I am happy to share. Actually, let me show you the actual real script that I showed you the printout of. What is this? Let me blow this up. So the verifications are obviously, if we are not in the right context, then you should not be running this script. That's an obvious one. Right. If you hit the button for new, then, and if your comment has an asterisk in it, that's the key to use the current configuration, right? That I mentioned earlier. So I wanted to run those pre-exports. So I put the asterisk. Now I haven't documented that for anyone because so far I'm the only one using it, and that's really bad. I'll be working about that, and my team can slap me for that later. Maybe. I know I'm bad about that one, so that doesn't let me off the hook. But anyway, so I did throw this together fairly quickly, though, that said, in my defense. So anyway, so I gave myself some options. I didn't start off building this with options, but I found while using it that I needed and wanted some. So I threw some in. So I would be happy to share this that kind of gives you the framework for doing something like this. And I could certainly share some of the scripts as well with I can strip the guts of the do stuff here guts so that I could give you the template of this. And really the reason that I wanted to talk about this, and I've run out of time pretty much here because I was late, and that's my fault, and I apologize again. I have to stop doing that. Sorry. I did that. Why do we do that? Why do women do that especially? And I almost did it again, but I caught myself. Okay. So while I was doing this, and while I was working on I was going into my subscripts and making sure if my subscripts had any subscripts that I was in fact rolling everything up, that I was, and of course there were subscripts where it probably wouldn't have mattered if I rolled everything up, and it wouldn't have mattered if I captured their durations and things. But, you know, I was in the middle of this exercise and I wanted to be thorough, and I didn't want anything to go wrong and me not know about it, or to have something happen and for anyone to be able to say, well, how could you not have known, right? Or at least I wanted to be able to say, as my daughter does whenever she answers the phone, I didn't do it, you know? So I would, or maybe I was just being obsessive. I don't know, whatever, OCD there. But I really wanted to do this exercise. And it got me thinking about scripting that I have seen some others do, like with the virtual value list and things like that, where a virtual sort, for example, where the scripting is multiple layers deep, barcode creator, for example, where there are multiple subscripts. And if there's an error anywhere, it could be at level 35 and the whole chain does the right thing, no matter where. And it's because the thread is intact all the way, because it's written consistently. That the pattern of how things are handled and how the messages are carried up the chain is consistent. And I don't think that as FileMaker developers, we tend to think that way.
Good coding.
And I think we should. And I think some of us have experienced our way into better habits, but we still don't tend to think that way. We may in practice work that way sometimes, or most of the time even, but I don't know that we always think of it for that reason, because we're often building something for what we need now. And we're thinking big picture, but we're not always coding the minutia for big picture.
Right.
If you know what I mean. Yes, Taylor.
Yeah, a lot of that's good coding practices, but also it's mastering how to manage loops and errors, you know, trappings within them, what to do when things don't happen as expected, and other than just bailing out.
Right, right.
Or hoping that errors don't happen. Like, well, it's unlikely.
Right.
So I'm just not going to track
that there's not ever going to be an error.
So,
Yes.
so Heather, I actually have a question
Yes.
about all this. With a script process that is taking 30 hours to run,
Yes.
how do you track for or mitigate against the possibility of your flying session losing internet connection or connection to the server during that time? And I know the answer to this. But how do you make sure that that doesn't happen, right? Or if you're on a laptop and, you know, there's a storm or something, or, you know, whatever it is, because that could have very unexpected results.
How critical is it?
Answer the question.
So, I mean, you could get into the real minutia of it's really a question of when did it fail? not even when did it fail, but where did it fail? Where did it last succeed? And so just like we're reporting the last completed script, you could also, though it would be a little more work, just like we do this refresh, you could just as easily take that refresh moment as an opportunity to record an update. Just like we do in ISS, where we have the log activity or activity log script that will actually leave where it is there and go over and create a record someplace else that says something, and then come back and pick up where it left off, right? So you can do basically the same thing, and occasionally at whatever interval is appropriate given the performance that you want to maintain, you could literally record progress as you're going along at regular intervals, so that if there were a crash, you would know where to pick up. Which is basically how syncing is done, though it's like at the packet level.
I guess the answer I was fishing for was that this was done on a remote desktop session on a VM on the client's network, which means that you didn't have to worry about your internet connection to their system. Now, granted, if there was a network issue in their system that prevented their machine to each other,
with this client, yes, that's absolutely
right?
correct. Sure.
You know, being right in this scenario, like doing it on a VM that's on that network means you don't have to worry about your internet going out.
Right. No, yes, correct. And which is another nice thing, because now I will say for everyone here that one of the other things that I found really great about this particular way that I did this was because I was able to test it, and before the actual go live, I actually tested the whole thing twice in full, start to finish. Now, it got bigger each time I tested it because we kept adding more scripts that we could throw on there, because as we got closer to go live, we found more things that we needed to backfill and other things that we needed to get done that needed to happen at the cutover. So it turned out to be a really handy tool. I'm glad. I think there would have been many of us going a little bit mad that weekend had it not been for this, but it really did just work. It also did point out there was one script that had a problem the first 2 times that I ran it, and I had to rerun that script the first 2 times afterwards. It didn't impact anything else, but it was a problem. And so I was able to figure out the problem, and the whole thing ran without issue the last time for go live. So it was good.
Lunch has been served.
Excellent. So lunch is here for those of us who are here. So does anyone remotely have any questions? Everyone's been so quiet. Or if they haven't been, I haven't been aware. Sorry. Oh, jeez.
I have a question. So
Yes.
Do you use this for just updating data for structure changes, like after you do something like using the migration tool or something like that?
Yes, this was used after the migration tool. So during this cutover, basically we rebuilt the bookkeeping module of a large system. And we added several features that they did not have before, including vendor credits, and we transferred ownership of a number of objects from QuickBooks into FileMaker. So many objects that did not exist in FileMaker before now existed, like checks, for example. So we had to backfill a lot of data, and we had to make sure that it matched up properly with expenses that expense lines. We also were transferring one expense system into a newer expense system. And so parity of data in that transfer was essential and had been a long worked upon task. So anyway, there were a number of pieces that all had to come together properly. And so there were a lot of moving pieces, all had to be, some had to be backfilled, some had to be modified, some had to be updated. In some cases, there were fields that were added. In some cases, there were, you know, auto enter calcs that were modified that then had to be re-triggered across millions of records. There were different requirements in every table. It was really a complete ground up kind of rewrite of the system, which is why it took as long as it did.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you did the data migration, correct?
Yes.
And how long did that, how big is the file? Just curious. How many gigs?
Eric just stepped out down the hall to get food. He would be the one to answer that.
I think it's a 3.
And how?
Daisy said she thinks it took about 3 hours to migrate.
Okay. Okay. And then, so that was in prep to when you turned it on at 11:30 that night, you had done the migration before that. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Yes. So,
okay, so I'm just looking at the total duration from, okay, we're going to do the transfer. We're going
yes, yes. So when I said 8 o'clock is the start, that was the start for the migration, not for the cutover scripting. Yes.
That's when we turn the files off.
Yeah, that's when we turned the files off, was at 8 o'clock.
Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it took you 33 hours then, total amount of time doing the migration and doing all your backfilling and running your scripts and stuff like that.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And I was, I usually when there is a build like that over the years, it's been, like I said, a babysitting exercise where I'm staying up late, I'm watching movies all night. And glancing over at the computer every, 10, 15 minutes to see if I'm there yet.
Have you looked at writing your log files to using the data files and stuff like that, and then creating a report into like a Word doc, just a text document or anything like that, or I have not. Like I said earlier, this was fine. Yeah, I created this specifically because of this large build for this particular system. And I really like how well it worked. And it got me thinking about other uses for it, particularly where we oftentimes have kind of one-off things that we build that we have to do. New requirements come in all the time from, Medicaid or